What's up, Rec Techies? ModernHire recently announced the launch of the Virtual Job Tryout, or VJT, for truck drivers. It's a pre-configured pre-hire assessment for candidates seeking employment as a commercial driver. VJT is for drivers is the latest offering in ModernHire's portfolio of job simulation and text-based assessments that measure key skills and abilities. So today we're going to talk to them and get a kind of quick demo of it, all in our quest here to just inform the modern recruiter and show you what's new out there as far as recruiting technology goes. So joining me now on the line is Bill Doyle from ModernHire, and he and I share the same love of hats. So hey, Bill, how's it going?
It's going great, Chris. Thanks for having me. I was going to make the same comment about we having similar taste in hats, so I love it.
That's right. Excellent, excellent. So first of all, where are you based, Bill, and then what do you do for the company?
Yeah, I am based right outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I have been with ModernHire for coming up on 11 years now. So I head up our solution consulting group. So I get the pleasure of talking with our clients and with prospects about how our technology can help fit into their process. How do we help try to achieve some of the recruiting goals, and get to have a lot of conversations about some of the new and fun things we're bringing into the market. So excited to be able to share a little bit about our newest VJT here as well today.
Yeah, it's you came out with this product specifically for truck drivers and truck driver recruiting. That's kind of what I thought was interesting about this. You see a lot of platforms out there just kind of be general overall tools for the market, but what was the impetus to make this kind of niche sort of feature?
Yeah, so it's about expanding the growing library of different roles that we serve, right? So there are things that are very specific, like a truck driver, and even then there's obviously a lot of different type of driver roles and this can be applicable across all. But we have right now a catalog of, I'll say, about 60 different roles that we really have not only just an assessment for, and we'll talk about the virtual job tryout, but really what we'll call more of an entire hiring blueprint, meaning we have, here's the path for that hire, whether it's being able to say it's a combination of maybe an initial tech screen, it is the assessment, it's a realistic job preview to go along with that, so tell them a little bit more about the role, it's the interview questions that you ask. So it's really about trying to say, how as you get to that kind of key part of the hiring process, once a candidate applies, from the point they apply through making the decision, how can we help drive the right type of interactions during that kind of set of usually what are still typically 2, 3, 4 steps in that process, but make sure that for us, the important piece here is how do we combine the activities, the different types of engagements the candidate having with the right type of science, really to try and make sure we're being effective, we're making sure it's engaging for the candidate, but we're also being able to drive some efficiency and scalability in the process there with the overarching kind of umbrella of let's make sure it stays ethical at the same time.
Yeah. What other types of roles do you have assessments for? Can you just maybe give us a broad overview there?
Yeah, so we have quite a bit, and I can actually probably even pull up a slide here to help talk about that as well too. So
yeah, if you want to share your screen, I think
let me pull this up here. So the idea here around as we think about the types of roles that we support. So this will give you kind of an overview. So some of them are industry specific. So as we think about the different types of industries, there's a lot that we do within banking and financial services or healthcare. The driver will put in kind of more of this industrial place, but a lot of these, again, this might be something that's these types of roles, whether it's a driver, a laborer, warehouse associate. Now that obviously fits in with the job family there is more industrial, but it could fit into, retail still has a lot of, drivers, and from an overall industry perspective, or a warehouse, or just general labor roles. We do a lot within retail. Then you have other roles or things that we service that are probably a little bit more cross industry. So every industry usually has some version of call centers. We have an entire call center suite of some variations on call center roles. A variety of more as you get into kind of what I'll call more of that mid-level white collar professional roles, a variety of kind of flavors of those that we can bring bear, some different sales, and then what we'll call our essentials, which really can go across a wider variety of things. So whether it's something that's very specific, like a driver or a nurse, or a collections call center type of role, or something that's a little bit more broad, we have this idea around what we'll call more of this catalog of these kind of blueprints and kind of pre-configured assessments that are really meant to be you can pick it up and use it off the shelf, or they can really be as the starting point to, how do you tailor bring that to life, make it very specific to a client as well.
Yeah. Where's recruiting in there? I don't see recruiting in there yet.
The recruiter would really fall into kind of more of that professional individual contributor. So the professional individual contributor, or the difference of those, would be the good basis for that. And it's really about, not only kind of where does the assessment fall, but then how do we bring to life some of this as part of this. So typically, when you look at these different roles, it's the assessment is one portion of it, but then you're combining this with other steps in the process. So the idea of a blueprint is really saying, for the role, and there might be some of these, it might be a 2-step process. In cases, maybe it looks like this, where it's a 3 or 4-step process, where you're combining some different elements here. And I'll step back in a second and talk about kind of the broader, here's the piece that we do. It's combining these things, but the idea and kind of the underlying piece for us with a lot of this is that as you have each of these different interactions, it's not just about, and we have the workflow element, so we can help conduct these different types of interviews, we can help with scheduling, we can do these things from kind of a workflow automation perspective. But the key blend for us is that balance between the technology and the science. So how do we make sure that there's easy and scalable ways to say, let's ask the right questions at each stage? Are we actually evaluating the candidate off the right criteria for each of those stages as well too? So it's the balance between those things for us.
Hey, the tech screening, let's go over that quickly. How popular is that among your client base? I think that's interesting. I want to see more vendors using texting in different ways, and that's interesting. Good, just touch on that if you could.
Yeah, and it fits into that broader piece of the different tech screens, and that's really kind of a key starting point for a lot of what we do, which is the outer part of this ring. So a lot of this is still going to get at kind of maybe some of what might be quick ways to get at those kind of quick screening, minimum qualification type questions. But a key part for us as we think about that blending of the science and technology is where maybe you're not even having that full assessment in place. We also have the ability to put a little bit of science into that tech screen as well. So a lot of times, while it might be those kind of minimum qualification questions, for a driver, that's going to definitely be things like, all right, do you have your CDL? Do you have a clean driving record? Are there certain hours or, number of hours or days a week you're looking to work? Those types of questions, of course, people think, all right, those are great screening questions. If you weren't going to do a full assessment, we could take what we call a career stability measure and put it into that tech screen. So it's adding 10 to 12 questions. Think about this as it's really adding 90 seconds on to a text interaction where we can at least give, and this goes across a variety of roles, a career stability indicator. Meaning, listen, if you're not going to go and put a full assessment into the process, we can at least say for a high volume role, let's give you a little bit of indication very early on in the process of, is this candidate kind of a turnover risk or not? So being able to say, let's score the candidate here. And if a candidate gets through all your screening questions, but then doesn't score as well in the career stability, this might be somebody who's a higher turnover risk. So being able to help identify that, but keep it for a candidate, something as simple as still a 2 or 3 minute quick interaction via text.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, and this is just, while I have this up, this is a good kind of grounding point of as we describe what we do across all of the roles we have. This, if I actually work inside out on this, the goal of anything we try and do is really kind of focused on what we'll call those 4 E's. And you kind of heard me mention them in my initial description there. It's really, how do we try and help make hiring processes that are efficient, effective, ethical, and engaging? The key thing for us there is we shouldn't have to sacrifice one of those to be able to accomplish the other. So it's how do we try and balance out those things? The middle of this circle is really that blending I'm talking about. Cognition is what we call our science. You'll notice the intentional nod to IO, or industrial organizational psychology, as part of that. That's a big foundation of what we do. We have over 45 IOs as part of our team. The number of scientists we have are actually greater than the number of our sales and marketing people combined. So it's really, that's a key factor for us, blending that with technology, but then having this optimization that's like, how do we continuously stay updated with that? And then use the combination of those things to bring the outer ring of this to life into that world of saying, all right, let's blend these things together, fit into that middle of the funnel, kind of that apply to decision point that I talked about, and then bring that to life for kind of the different, whatever the different workflow is. So different example here of what, this is kind of what I had prepped more from the driver perspective today, of walking through those interactions from a driver standpoint of here's kind of what that hiring workflow might look like specifically for a driver.
Okay. As we get into that with the VJT, I want to let's start with the candidate journey in terms of how they actually interact with this. Like, is it web-based? Is it on their phone? Give me some details around that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's all web-based. So we're web-based, and everything we do is responsive. So there's never an app they have to download. So whether they're doing this on their phone or on a mobile device, we typically see, and it varies a little bit based on the type of role, For a role like driver, we'll see probably upwards of 60% that do it from a mobile device as kind of their first piece, whether that's phone or tablet. And then you still saw some that do it more from a tablet or a larger kind of laptop type thing, but we still see kind of that increase in there. So mobile first is always a key design for us. The workflow for this, and I have an example queued up to kind of walk through just that. Let's walk through. We'll get to the output of what the kind of a recruiter and hiring manager sees, but I figured it would be helpful to actually start with what's a candidate interaction going to look like for this. So
Great. Yep.
On this, again, we come in right after a candidate applies. So, a lot of cases here, and again, the idea around our blueprints are really meant to be a starting point. So if you don't need a step in the process or you need to modify it, you can always change that. But, the idea around a text screening early on, candidate applies, a few minutes later, they get a text message that says, we got some additional questions for this driver position that you've applied for. All of this, of course, being branded towards whatever the company is. As I said, in this case, from a kind of screening perspective, it might be more of those eligibility type questions. We will have a variety of these. It's really about what's unique for that company in terms of their minimum requirements. So maybe it is those eligibility pieces. Maybe we're looking for people that can work certain shifts, that can work a certain number of hours. Maybe we're asking some of the safety questions there around, do you have a CDL? Do you have a clean driving record within the last 2 years? Those types of questions. This is one where as you do that, you're going to answer those yes, no, multiple choice type questions, quickly go through that. It's going to move into really driving kind of that automated next step. So immediately getting kind of, here's another text message, here's an email. If we don't have your phone number, most of the time we're driving most of it through, we have a cell phone number, and that's the way we're starting it. As they do that, they're getting prompted to go through and take that next step. That next step is really where we get into the combination of the virtual job tryout. So as a candidate is kind of ingrained into starting this process, and I'll kind of flip back and forth here between what does a desktop version of this look like versus the mobile version. Couple things I'll point out in the first part of this process is, this is where I'll pause and say, the boring thing when we always see this is we always see like everybody's gotten used to seeing more of these like data processing consent forms, right? So everybody sees this. What do we always do when we see this? We scroll to the bottom, hit accept. Hardly do we ever stop and read this. So as we think about this from the perspective of what that means for candidates, especially as you start finding ways that within a hiring process, you can leverage AI as part of the process. One of the things we know is there's more and more regulations coming out around the use of AI. GDPR, the new New York City law that takes effect in January. So we're mindful of that. Now, we could meet the requirements of those legislations by adding a sentence or two around the use of AI if we're putting that into a process, into the statement here. We don't believe that's enough. So if we're going to go the E in ethics, and the idea here around, if we're talking about AI, we have what we'll call much more of a glass box approach versus a black box approach. So if we're going to insert the use of AI into there, when the candidate accepts that, if AI is part of the process, and I'll be clear here, the AI that I'm talking about for the purpose of the driver is actually part of the interview. It's not actually part of the virtual job tryout, but I combine those into the step, but it's part of an on-demand interview that's here. If we're leveraging AI here, we actually show the candidate a complete separate piece around the fact that we are using AI. It's also designed to do this in a simpler form. It's not designed to be that big legal data processing consent. And we're highlighting 4 key things we want them to understand as part of this process. So we're going to look at the content of what they say only. So we're never evaluating things like facial analysis, tone of voice, body movement. We're going to talk about the fact that it was trained by real experts, i.e. RIOs, of going through and teaching the model of here's the right way to evaluate things. That a human is making the final decision. So it's never the AI that's making a decision. It's just going to provide information to a human who makes the decision. So that recruiter or hiring manager. And then most importantly here, it's a consistent experience. So they can choose, different than like if you don't accept that data processing or GDPR type consent, your process stops. Here you can say, I'm not okay with the use of AI. We'd still let you go through the whole process. You still show your results there. We just wouldn't put an AI score along with it. We've actually seen here, as you think about how candidates are getting comfortable with this, we've seen about a 99% accept rate of candidates when you present information to them here. We found that, right, if you tell candidates up front what you're looking for them, they're more willing and kind of understanding of what it is. So then from a candidate experience standpoint, those are kind of here's the disclaimer type stuff up front. The very next thing they're going to see is what we'll call a realistic job preview. So again, now depending on how this candidate's going through, whether this is something they're doing on their computer or they're doing on their mobile device, you see it's responsive, it's going to work well in either of those fashions. The idea around a realistic preview is to do exactly as it sounds. Let's tell you a little bit more about the job, about the company. So we're going to thank the candidate for their interest. We're going to tell them a little bit more about the role here as well. So giving, say, all right, here's a little bit more about what you can expect. This is also one of the nice ways that from a kind of employer brand standpoint, that clients can be able to insert their own imagery, their own videos. You can have audio that narrates over this. So let's make sure candidates understand this. Let's talk about the things that we know that the current employees like about the role. What are the benefits? What are the rewards that come with this? What are the, the perks that your current employees in the role like? But it is a realistic preview. So at the same time, we also want to be upfront with what are the things that might be more challenging about the role here as well, too. One of the things that it's not uncommon, and this is true for driver roles as well, is that, a candidate might apply for a role, but then they get in there and how much, day one, week one, month one turnover does a company have because, candidates come back with the, oh, well, this wasn't what I thought it was. So if you're more upfront with that in the front end of the process here, it's great. You can tell the candidates, here's kind of what you can expect as next steps. So the idea here, and this is actually consistent for any of our assessments or for kind of those on-demand interviews that we produce, it's being able to say, we want to front load this experience that a candidate's doing on their own time with a way that they can learn more about the job, more about the company. They have all this so that they're going into the process already learning more. Make sense?
Yep.
So candidate goes through, does that. Very next thing that they're going to do is, and this is where they actually go through and start the assessments. Now, our assessments, so the virtual job tryout, the name is intentional. The idea is we want the candidate to try out the job. We also take what is called a multi-method approach to our assessments, meaning that it's not designed to just be a personality assessment, for example. It's not designed to just be like a cognitive assessment, but instead we'll call multi-method or more whole person. We're going to actually take the candidate through several different types of exercises, all designed to simulate different parts of the job to help produce an overall kind of view of this candidate, both to help them, as the name suggests, try out the job so they get familiar with the types of things they might be doing, types of situations that might there, but then we're able to produce a better measure overall. And we'll show you when we get more to the recruiter side of here's how we evaluate the candidate of how well is this candidate going to do on the entire job. As we go through the different sections on that, again, no matter how the candidate's going through, and I'll kind of flip back and forth as we go, designed to work well across those different devices, so especially as a driver who's just doing this on their phone, where maybe, they saw this. It's not uncommon that even some of the opt-in pieces, maybe they're doing this as they're currently driving for another company, and they get to a rest area at night and are looking for other jobs, and now I can quickly go through and still do this well, even in my truck on that, being able to get through those different types of experiences. Those instructions at the front end of each of these. So the first one here is going to be handling work challenges. This is where we're going to take the candidate through several different types of situations, right? This is what we're really getting called situational judgment. So we're going to present them with different situations. In this case, your vehicle's parked in a designated loading zone, but the street's highly congested. A few vehicles are waiting behind you. The driver exits their vehicle and starts yelling at you. So a very common occurrence that might happen for a driver. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, we're going to give the candidate several different options. What are you most likely and least likely to do? The idea here is these situations, they're not designed to have, there's not a right or wrong answer. It's kind of shades of the possible here. So we're going to say, all right, what are these things that are here? So these not a clear right or wrong, be able to, kind of what are those things you're going to be most likely to respond in the situation? And you're going to take the candidate through several different versions. This shortened kind of demo version I have only has a couple items here. I think the actual VJT has 6 or 7 different types of scenarios that you're going through there. So again, things that you're very likely to experience in the job. One of the other things that's true around all of our assessments is that, as I said, they're designed to be kind of, you can take them off the shelf and use them, or you can, kind of use them as a starting point, meaning we have the ability to contextualize where if we want to, change this. So if they're not, if a particular, customer calls, these aren't, they're not, a fellow employee, but they're team members, or it's not supervisors, or we can, make different parts of the products and use their names there. So you can make it look and feel like a client more and more. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to get into another type of exercise. Here's one that's called, check your dashboard. So this is getting into the ability, obviously being able to look at, leverage a lot of information as part of this process is there. So candidate that's going through here, we'll highlight for them. Maybe you'll find some different resources available. Again, designing to be able to use these well across those different pieces. So resources might say, all right, what actions do you need to take before you leverage, leave the depot? So you'll have kind of your dashboard here of some information, be able to look back at some resources here. So being able to say, all right, here's what are maybe some of the acceptable ranges for this. So being able to say, hey, can they consume information, use this to interpret the right types of things? Say, right, do I need to be able to, make some changes here? Do I need to learn the manager about an issue I see? Do I need to refill or go fill up on some different items here? So being able to see that information. We'll take them through some of these different types of scenarios, or maybe it's even doing things here. One of the things we'll know is important, kind of that ability of attention to detail, accuracy of information is important for a driver. So this idea around maybe an exercise that has the ability to check for errors. So one where we start saying, all right, imagine you have a load sheet that's in front of you and you need to go through and start verifying information to be able to see, all right, can we just do a quick spot check of, does this information match or not? Where are we getting into this, being able to say, how quickly are they doing that or getting the accuracy of information into that process? So a variety of things that as a candidate that's going through a scenario like this, instead of it being a test where they're going through and just doing multiple choice, they're starting to see how everything you're asking them, relates to the job or gets into what we'll call more of that face validity. The candidate clearly understands, okay, I understand I'm being asked things that I'm clearly going to have to do on the job. There's two more sections in the assessment. The first one's called Tell Us Your Story. This is a way to get at kind of the candidate's work history, kind of what we'll call more of kind of the bio data that goes into this, kind of getting some of that history. This is an easy way to say, a lot of times is you have people that are going through and you can look at resumes, but sometimes that's not always easy to extrapolate the same kind of key things from a resume. So how's it we can get at some of the key things that we know are important for this specific job? So maybe we're looking at how much experience they have in similar types of kind of the manual labor jobs. We might be looking at things. This is another way that we can get at that career stability piece. So, looking at how long they've stayed there, we might ask questions about, how many times they've left a job within a month of starting. We'll get at some of this. We might look at things that we also know are important for a role like this. Safety is a key priority in roles like this. So being able to say, have you had issues with violating a safety or attendance policy at a previous job? So again, things this is something that's in each one of our assessments, but the questions that are asked in this section are going to vary quite a bit and vary based off of the type of role, the type of job that they're doing. And then the last step in this assessment is one that's called Describe Your Approach. So this is really getting at more of the candidate's work history, kind of personality as a part of this. Again, different way we frame questions here. And this is one where we're going to give the candidate kind of two different statements. And say which of these is most like you, and they're able to say this is most or somewhat like me. Being able to say, this again, there's not a kind of right or wrong answer to this. It's more about trying to understand that individual candidate's approach to things. So being able to move into which of these things as they go through, and kind of just general viewpoints. All of this is again getting into the idea of how can we get to more of that whole person measure. Do it in a way that, for the driver, this is about a total, this entire experience from a candidate experience is a, 25, 30-minute type of experience for the candidate. But as they're doing it, it's every kind of section is a little bit different into this. This is also one where as we get into kind of as I hit next, because of how we've combined this particular blueprint, we're actually having that candidate go through what is the assessment, which we actually just finished the assessment, but we have a couple of interview questions we're having the candidate answer here as well too. Now, there is, with our interview technology, there's a wide variety of things we can do with that
Audio-based, right?
Yeah, it's audio based. It could be video, it could be text. From a driver perspective, video doesn't become the right fit for this. You don't need to have a truck driver sit in front of and ask video questions, but having them answer a couple audio questions. So again, maybe it's getting at some of those safety questions that they're answering. So you have them go in, record an answer from a safety perspective, be able to do this. You might have a few different questions you ask them about this. So maybe it's about being able to work efficiently or, following rules and procedures, getting at some of those things. They'll go through, answer those questions. By default, we've always given the ability to re-record, and there's a lot of flexibility clients can put on those things here. But the idea of a candidate that's gone through this, they go through, they've said, all right, I've done the assessment, I answered a few interview questions, I can submit this. After any of our candidate experiences, we typically also give candidates a chance to kind of give feedback on that experience as well too. So we use that feedback to improve. It's also something we share back with our clients as well. And as they go through and do this, we do this. One of the things we've also done, and this is true across all of our assessments, not just the driver, is we have the ability to turn on what's a candidate feedback report, meaning as soon as that candidate finishes that experience, they have a chance to get some feedback from that as well. And the way that that feedback comes is that from this experience, we actually can go through and share, here's what we learned of the top 5 strengths that you have as a candidate from having gone through this. So they took the time to go through an assessment. So let's leave them with something in the form of, here's some of the key things we learned about you and some 5 key strengths of that this candidate has, a little bit of how maybe they can, leverage that going forward from a career perspective. So it's, again, the idea around these experiences from an engagement standpoint is we front load the beginning of this with, let's tell them more about the company and more about the job. We make sure that the experience they're going through is actually relevant for the type of job. They can see how it relates. And then you give them something to take away with them at the end in the form of some, meaningful feedback about what we learned about them here as well. Any questions around kind of that idea around the candidate experience? I can flip over and look at, here's what the output of this is here as well. But
yeah, let's kind of wrap up by showing us what the employer sees, and we'll close it out there, I guess.
Yeah. So from the perspective of this, the nice thing here is that as you have moved candidates through this process, you'll be able to see this is the job as it looks like here. All of this information routes back to the ATS as well too. So scores, summary information is all going to go back into the applicant tracking system. But a lot of times for this, I can see as candidates move through this, I can go into my different candidates here as well. And as I look at any of these candidates, not only can I kind of see the overall summary of information here, so I can see here's how my candidate did. We typically do 2 types of overall scores. We typically score everything on a 5-point scale. This candidate got a 4 out of 5. As we think about that 5-point scale, it's also designed so to think about higher volume roles. About 20% of candidates will end up in each scoring band, right? So as you're trying to think about how this works, and then you'll also get that career stability score. So you might have a candidate who's a 4 or 5. They fall in that excellent fit for the role. If they were to be in like a weak fit there, this maybe, hey, they're a great fit for the role, but they're a higher turnover risk. So you get that information. And then each of our assessments is also designed to look at a series of competencies that we know are important for that. This is, that we're saying the decision making should be made on the overall, but we're also going to show you that, listen, this candidate is moderately effective at producing quality work, but they're highly effective at working efficiently and following rules and procedures. So giving you some information on that. We also produce, that's kind of the main decision making report, or kind of what we call the candidate, profile. We will also produce, based on the assessment, any recommended follow-up questions. So here's for the live interview that can follow. Here's some recommended follow-up questions based on things the candidate said. We even produce what we'll call more of a developmental feedback or onboarding report that could be used for new hires as well too. So it repeats the same 5 key strengths we had from a candidate perspective, but it also produces, here are 3 areas of opportunity as well too. So, and each of those contains some developmental tips. So you'll be able to see that information. So you'll have a summary here of here's how the candidate did overall, but also be able to see the idea here around, here's the interview question the candidate was asked. Now, this interview question, it did have our AI turned on, but in this case, we weren't able to score that because I was recording and I only recorded a 5-second answer. And one of the things we won't score if it can't be understood or if it's not long enough or the candidate opts out. But you'll still say here, I can listen to the candidate's answer. We will provide guidance on the screen as well too, of here's what you should be listening for as you review this answer, and be able to go through and have the human provide kind of this. If the AI was on, it would recommend a rating here, but the human could kind of agree with this or not. And then being able to say, as I kind of finalize for this candidate, I have my overarching aspect of the candidate to be able to say, maybe an overall review, or would I move this candidate to the next step or not? That next step being one, as we get into that final step where we might invite the candidate who went through and did that to say, great, here's a link, schedule your live interview. For that live interview, being able to even say, all right, here's now details on where you're going, how to check into the building, what you need to bring with you, or where to park. But from an interviewer perspective, being able to also say, listen, now here's, again, as you get into those live conversations, the ability to say, all right, here's the live interview, here's the interview guide and the feedback form to conduct that conversation as well. So the right questions to ask, the right way to evaluate this. So again, the idea around all of this is saying, how can we get into kind of this overarching blueprint that says, here's an entire hiring process laid out with content and evaluation at each stage to really drive what can be effective hires for, in this case, a driver position.
Well, I'm just curious, do most trucking companies assess trucking candidates as part of the overall hiring process? How unique is this, or how normal is it in the process?
I think we're seeing it become more and more normal, especially as we're getting to, there's drivers, a lot of times drivers, there's a lot of specific measurements to look at how effective drivers are. We have, and as we've had with where a lot of our assessments come from, they come from, as we get more and more demand for it, we'll kind of start with more of a tailored assessment and then start saying, all right, we see now done this across a number of companies, and we can take enough of what are the similarities here to be able to produce what we'll call more of that pre-configured assessment to be able to use for others. And we have a lot of our clients, there are large, whether they're transportation logistic clients, we have a lot of retail clients. So we do driver hiring for here as well. And we started to see where they're wanting consistency and being able to say, we have a lot of people that are looking for this, but how do we make sure this is somebody who's really going to work well in the role? And then, a key part for us, which is that third layer in the middle of the circle, which that optimization is, let's look at how effective these assessments are. So it's also being able to go back, look at the performance, look at the retention for the people in the role after we've actually hired them using the assessment, to be able to say how effective were they, use that to update the assessment as well as, longer term here as well too, is looking back, actually kind of that idea around the closed loop of let's take the people who went through, look at how they performed on the role, use that to feedback in continually improving the assessment.
Sounds good. Well, appreciate the time today, Bill, and thanks for the walkthrough. I think it's interesting technology, and look forward to seeing how you guys evolve it. So appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate the time. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Yep. Check them out at modernhire.com, and that'll do for today. So thanks for watching, everybody. See you next time. All right. That's a wrap.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent.
Chris, just let me know if you have any follow-up questions or anything like that.
Yeah, I'll publish it Monday, and I'll tag you guys on the socials, as they say.
Super.
Right.
That's great. Thank
All
you.
right.
Have a great weekend.
Well,
Bye.
bye.
Take care.